Didn't love the movie.
Marcia,
Good
if you
morning,
watch that whole
everybody.
movie-
I'm sorry I got on the phone right away.
No, we got you.
I like that song.
You got my song by now.
Marcia, if you
Hi,
watch that whole
Miriam.
Noah movie, you're a whole lot better person than I am. I got through about 10 minutes of it.
I
That was
did
enough
watch
for
it. It
me.
was it was dreadful. But and then I'm saying, hey, didn't all the three sons had wives? And he's saying this one son didn't have a wife. But what was interesting that I liked in the movie, that it showed, it indicates at the beginning that Ham is a little not as upstanding as the other two guys, the other two sons. And then and then when we read, I think I mentioned it, we read about Babel, I get Nimrod was the one who instigated the tower, and he was Ham's son or grandson. So
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It is time to start. Again, let's remember to mute ourselves unless we raise our hand and wish to talk. So be respectful of that. And let us go ahead and begin with the blessings.
Oh, there's nothing in there. I didn't put anything. Don't worry about it.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher nikudshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'asot divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the world, who sanctified us with your commandments and us to engage in the words of Torah. Okay, Rabbi, we're going to learn about Abraham or Abram.
Correct. Good morning. Skinny's joining us for a little while. I hope everyone is well and that you're excited about Noah for those in that course. Good morning to those who are relatively new. Larry, of course, and Steve. And I think that's it. So welcome to all. Today we're moving into Parshat Lech Lecha, which is my bar mitzvah portion, and it's a very interesting portion because it's talking about Abraham being picked by God, or God being picked by Abraham, and going out and exploring the world, and being asked by Abraham to go to the land that God will show him. So it's really quite an important episode. It's considered the first parsha that talks about the Jewish people as opposed to universal themes, right? The first week's parsha, Adam and Eve are not Jewish. The second week's parsha, Noah, is not Jewish. The people of the Tower of Babel are not Jewish. Now we're coming into something more particularistic. We're in Harvey Field's page 39. Is it ever right to lie? And the reason we ask this question is because Abraham and Sarah, or certainly Abraham, lies on one of their trips. So let's just start with the question itself. Now, of course, the question is out of context because Abraham and Sarah are lying in quite a particular situation. But let's just ask it, forgetting about Abraham and Isaac and Sarah for a moment, is it ever right to lie? A couple of quick thoughts. Rochelle.
Had worked in emergency medicine as well as went in to become a behavioral health specialist. There were several occasions where sometimes it's just best to not tell people the truth to save them the trauma. And that is not only good practice, that's actually, I've done it. I've never felt good about it, but it was for the other person's that I've not told somebody that I didn't tell a woman that her son committed suicide. I let her go ahead and believe that it was an accident. She never got to see the body, but it wasn't. I didn't want that mom living her life like that. If we could help it, we didn't want to do it.
So you're lying for somebody's emotional well-being. They're better, now there's some cases where they want to know and they have a right to know. And then there's other cases where they don't really want to know. And you're going to tell them you're going to wreck a very fragile person further. Miriam.
Did Abraham really lie? I was wondering about it because they say he married his niece in one place, and one place they said that he married his father's daughter. Now that would make him a half sister. So is he really lying? Because, and which was it? Was he a half sister? Was there intermarriage in families like that at that time?
That's a superfluous question. I mean, that's a good question, but I have no idea, what marriage customs were. Now remember, Abraham originally came from Ur of the Chaldees, correct? We think. And that's pretty much, up there in northern Iraq, where the whole, all those clay tablets were found. So this is the quote unquote cradle of civilization. And this is supposedly the most sophisticated people in the world at that time. So one would assume they're not marrying their sisters, but I don't know, clearly, things may have been different then, things were different then. Good morning, Jennifer. Other comments, Marcia? The question is it ever okay to lie?
You have to unmute.
Click twice. Okay. I think there are times, years ago, no one would talk about cancer. And it was a big C word. If somebody had it, the rest of the family didn't tell them about it, which wasn't really right. There are so many times, there are people who want to prepare and they deserve to know what they're facing into. And that's a pretty drastic situation. But sometimes a little white lie when someone's, does this look good on me? And you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't think that's such a terrible thing.
Right. Yeah, I learned a long time ago when a woman says, does this dress look good on me? There's only one possible answer to that question. Babette or Barry?
Yeah, I agree with Miriam about the fact that he did probably marry a sister. If you read the Midrash, it does indicate that he married his father's daughter.
So a half sister.
Or half sister. So, so that was a half lie. Their relationship was actually husband and wife. That was their relationship for sure. But additionally, she was his sister.
So does it matter if you?
So it's not like he lied. He failed to give information that might have given a different impression.
All right.
That makes sense.
So if somebody asks you a question and you outright lie, is that different from if you technically are telling the truth, but you're totally misleading the person? So
the sin of omission.
Right. Like I have a PhD in history. So if somebody on an airplane says, oh, there's somebody in respiratory failure, is there a doctor in the house? I could technically stand up and say, I'm a doctor, but I'm misleading them because that's not the kind of doctor they want. And they know that, I know that, and they know that. And so is there, does it matter if you're technically within the, so if Abraham is saying it's my sister, and if it is his sister, but he's married to her, that's misleading to the point of lying, right? Rochelle.
I mean, would there have been a punishment for him at that time had he came out and said that? That's I guess my thing.
Barry,
Would there have been punishment?
what would you say would have happened to Abraham if he told the truth?
And told her,
Told
the king that he was his wife?
Yeah.
Well, the fear was that he would be killed and they would rape her.
Yeah, that they would kill him to take the wife, away.
Oh,
right.
Okay, that's right. And he had her parade as his sister as opposed to his wife.
Then there's no need to kill him because they can just take her, in a friendly transaction. Maybe they could trade give the brother a few cows or something, or horses or goats or whatever.
It sounds like they need to visit better places.
This is the ancient Near East. There were no better places. I mean, this is where all the food was. Yes, Babette.
Well, I think there's a lot of flexibility with Jewish laws. You're supposed to fast on Yom Kippur, but if it would hurt you further, if it would damage your health, you're not supposed to do anything to hurt yourself. So I think it's perfectly all right for the good purpose of saving Miriam to tell a little bit of Misa.
So it's okay to lie in this case to save his own life, really.
Absolutely.
And he's not doing any harm. Okay, Bonnie, and then Pam, and then Lorraine, and then Miriam, and then Marcia.
I think that withholding, I agree with Rochelle as far as withholding information to spare someone from emotional trauma. To me, the sin of lying is when you tell just an absolute lie about someone else that perhaps you don't like, and people believe it, and it really brings harm to the innocent person that is being lied about.
All right, so it's a different type of lie. So if I lie and I say Bernie is a serial car thief, then I'm hurting his reputation. I'm lying for malicious purposes. That's a completely different kind of lie than if I'm in a situation like this and I say, that somebody's my sister so I don't get killed.
Right.
All right. So if you're on a plane and if Islamic radicals take over the plane, they say, "Who's Jewish?" And I stand up and say, "I cannot lie. I'm an Episcopalian priest." That's okay.
I don't know, Daniel Pearl, before he was executed, he said, "I am a Jew."
Yeah.
So I think
they knew he was Jewish, so he really didn't have the option of getting out of it by lying. So there was no, purpose to, he wanted to affirm his identity, and he knew he was in trouble.
Well, he could have changed his mind at the last minute too, and said, "I was lying. I'm not Jewish."
But they knew he was.
Oh, okay.
He was a reporter. They knew his background.
I didn't know ISIS was that smart.
Yeah, they targeted him deliberately. Who was second? Pam?
I agree with Babette. I just think when you open your mouth, things are not often black and white. And I think you have to look at the bigger picture on what you're going to say and how that is going to affect what's going to happen next with the people that you're talking to. And so, yeah, I think it's okay to lie sometimes.
Okay. Who was third? Marcia? No, who was third? Lorraine, sorry.
Yeah. Hi, good morning, everyone. I've lived my whole life thinking lying is just not necessary to be a part of my being for several reasons. When I was working and I got together with my new staff. I was their leader. And I told them, I don't have too many rules, but one is please do not lie to me. Because when you lie to me, what happens is you're assuming I'm ignorant enough to believe whatever Bubba might say, they didn't know that word, whatever fictitious tale you're telling me. And that hurts me. Okay, so no lying. Tell me the truth, what's going on in this department, and we'll deal with it. But more than that, I have always felt that if you start to lie, and it's easy. I mean, there are little times in life when you don't want to hurt someone, or someone says, "Do I look fat in this dress?" You don't have to say, "Oh, yeah, you'll look horrible." You could just say, I think you'd look better in a different color. You just twist it a little, soften it. I remember going with my mom, may she rest in peace, to the eye specialist. Mom had very bad diabetes, and the doctor had asked that I come with her to the appointment. Now, my mother was sharp like Miriam. She was old, but she was sharp. And she didn't want doctors sugarcoating any of the discussions. And she never wanted them to talk to me. She wanted the doctors to ask her, like, "What'd you have for breakfast today?" And then they'd look at me, and my mother would go, "How would she know? She wasn't in the house with me." So the doctor came over to me before the visit, and he said, "Mom is going blind," because she had very bad diabetes. And I said, "Please," and it was the first time in my life, I think, that I lied. I said, "But it was to spare her." I said, "She has no symptoms right now. She's not struggling to read." And I said, "Please don't tell her, because once you tell her, she will worry every time something seems a little cloudy or she's having difficulty
Right.
with some prep." So he agreed with me. He said, "Okay." And he did not tell her. And you know what? She passed away like 10, 12 years later, and she never exhibited any of the blindness that he was anticipating down the road. So I feel if you lie, and this is changing to the next part of my thought, and then you have to follow your tracks. You have to keep your story straight. And you have to ask yourself, did I tell her that version? Or did I tell this person this other version? I think it's just easier to tell the truth or gently remove the sting if necessary.
Right, and I agree with Lorraine, but I guess we're talking about 2 or 3 or 4 different types of situations completely. So if you're, I mean, I've known people who were, in social situations would just lie about nothing. So instead of saying they went, or almost nothing, they went to the ice cream store, they'd say they went to the pharmacy. And then eventually, you'd say, "You're gaining a lot of weight from all these visits to the pharmacy." And then, it's hard to keep track of these. These are little pointless fibs, but there's another situation where it's, in this case that we're looking at today, where it's a matter of life and death. So that's, I think, different situation. So who was 4th is Marcia, and then who was 5th was Bernie, and then Miriam.
I don't know if I'm jumping the gun on Bernie, but well, 2 things. I mean, we had a congregant who lied every time he got to the Mishaberach. He would get up and talk about his daughter who had cancer and this and that, and he was a doctor. The whole thing was totally made up. He wanted everybody to go, "Oh," at the end of it, and it was just a stupid lie. And I told my friend Harvey, "This isn't right. This is like Job. Nobody has all these troubles every week consecutively. You can't be." So that's just a wrong lie. But you got to go back now. Seriously, though, the Spanish Inquisition, all those people who said they weren't Jewish and hid their, Judaic background, they were just covering them. They were saving their own lives. There was no point in them just going to the slaughter if they could get away with it. I mean, that's an appropriate lie, if you will, you know?
No, never appropriate.
Okay, Bernie, Miriam, and Cy.
I have to agree with Lorraine on one thing. If you don't lie, you have a whole lot less to remember. But in this particular case with Abraham, it seems to be situational. And the text later on seems to indicate that he didn't have to do it after all. The Pharaoh said, "Why did you do all of that? I wouldn't have done anything bad."
All right, but that's like when I was at the outside of dog park and this huge dog came running up to my dogs and I stood and tried to protect my dogs. And then the owner comes up and says, "What are you getting so worried about? My dog won't bite your dogs." And like, how do, you don't know that in advance, right? So Abraham had no idea of knowing whether they were going to try to kill him or not, right?
Well, can you live your whole life that way?
Well, it's a good question. Okay, who is next is Miriam and then Riva, I think, right? Okay.
I just feel by what we've all been saying that there's like a little white lie, which sometimes can be helpful. And then there's a downright lie. And I think there's a big difference between them. If you take a look at it, at what we were saying, the little white lies sometimes do good. But these lies, if I tell you, for example, you're not a rabbi, how do you do what you're doing? That, you know what I mean? Whereas,
there's a lot of people running around who are not rabbis who are claiming to be rabbis. So occasionally I joke about that, but I guess you could contact Hebrew Union College or the Central Conference of American Rabbis, and you could check. You could say, "We got this rabbi. I'm very suspicious of him. Does he actually have a degree from you guys?" And they would check it up for you, and you come back. You'll never guess what I found out.
Yeah, that's so. I just feel it sometimes in some conditions, from what I've been hearing everybody say, that it is helpful for a little white lie.
Okay, Riva and then Cy.
Yeah, I agree with everybody who said context is everything. And I've got a quick quote from the 5 Books of Moses by Schocken, Schocken Bible.
That is a translation, I believe, by Everett Fox.
That's right.
And this is a very innovative translation from about 20 years ago, using the German method of Martin Buber and Franz Rosenzweig to translate the Torah into English.
So let me quickly read the quote. It says, "This is the first of 3 such stories which are practically identical. All pose a challenge for the interpreter. An honored man of God seeks to save his own skin by passing his wife off as his sister. In each case, the patriarch emerges safely and with increased wealth." So not only did he get away with saying what he did, it paid off in three places.
But as Bernie points out, it kind of offended the Pharaoh. He said, "This was not necessarily to lie with me." It sounded to me from the text that the Pharaoh's a little bit hurt that Abraham didn't trust him enough to be more open with him. Back to you, Riva.
It just seems peculiar to me that somebody is rewarded for telling a lie. You know, that Abram was rewarded for lying. That sort of doesn't make sense at sort of any level to me.
Okay, Cy.
Well, I think we're kind of beating around here because this can go on forever as to the meaningfulness of a lie. sometimes a lie is for the greater good. When you think of it in terms of politics, for example, between the relationships between people, between nations, lies are constantly told. They're not called lies, maybe a little misinformation, but these things are very important. They're very important for the good of a nation, putting it on that level. And I think that's the major consideration.
Okay, Marcia, and then maybe one of the two Steves. Do we have two Steves here? Okay,
Truth in advertising, truth in a lot of things. We, as society, we are always lying about stuff, and it just depends on how bad a lie it is. I mean, Bernie Madoff, let's throw him in the mixing, the liar of the world, and other politicians who lie constantly. And so it depends on how bad it's going to hurt people. And if it's a minor lie, I think it's permissible, but when it becomes a major situational lie, I think it's not. I used to say to my kids, just don't lie to me, and don't tell me about something that's like lying. That sin of omission gets to me.
oh no, that's so I don't know if I agree with Marcia here. I mean, not telling parents certain things seems to me quite different from lying about it. So if I go out and I steal a car and I do drugs and I rob a bank, and my parents would say, did you have a peaceful evening? I would think the best response would be to just smile and say, I'm exhausted, I'm going to bed. Just don't answer, it's an omission. I don't think that that's the same thing as lying and saying, I spent the night playing Hebrew Scrabble, which was a present from Bernie, right? Remember, Bernie, you gave me the Hebrew Scrabble. So that would be a pretty big lie. So better to just to not say anything. But Marcia wouldn't like that. She feels that that's not good either. All right, Steve Siegel, and then if Steve Dornbush wants to add after that about lying, and then Pam.
We have to also take into consideration the perpetual liar who you don't want to trust.
Right.
It's all about the trust in the person that's talking. And it's that liar is not to be trusted, period.
Okay, Steve Dornbush, lying? No. Okay, Pam, lying?
Are we going to discuss Nachmanides' condemnation? Because I think that's very interesting about what he said.
Okay, you want to wait or you want to read the paragraph now?
Whatever you want.
All right, where is it?
Right below the picture of him on page 39.
Okay. Well, why don't you read the previous paragraphs as well, and we'll read through that paragraph.
We'll start right at the top with Abram and Sarah, that one.
Yeah, from the beginning, we're at the bottom of 39 on the left-hand column.
Okay.
We're going to read the left-hand column and part of the right-hand column.
Okay. Is it ever right to lie? Abram and Sarah find themselves in a dangerous situation within our Torah portion. They have gone to Egypt in order to escape from famine in the land of Israel. Fearing some Egyptian will admire Sarah and kill him, Abram tells her not to reveal that she is his wife. When the Pharaoh of Egypt asks who she is, she tells him he is Abram's sister. Later, after Pharaoh discovers the truth, he confronts Abram and says, "Why didn't you tell me that she was your wife?" The Torah does not tell us what Abram answered. We are only informed that Pharaoh sent him away with Sarah with all the riches he had acquired in Egypt. Should Abram have lied? Was it permissible for him to say his wife was his sister in order to save himself? Faced with the fear that he might be killed by the Egyptians, Abram may have decided to tell a half-truth. He would say that Sarah was his sister, which in fact she was, but she but would not reveal that she was his wife. The commentator Maimonides condemns Abram for his behavior. He says that Abram committed a great sin by not telling the truth about his wife. He should have trusted that God would save him and his wife and all his belongings.
Okay, there you go.
God would expect Abram to use his good judgment. I disagree with the condemnation of Abram.
Well, I guess it depends on how you look at this relationship between Abram and God. Like if the whole thing is based upon Abraham trusting God, and then Nachmanides can make a case that, if you're going to trust God, then you should just tell the truth and go with what God is telling you to do, and that God's putting you in that situation, and God wouldn't do that if you needed to lie. I mean, I'm just Barry. What do you think of Nachmanides' criticism of Abraham here?
There we go. We got unmuted. Yeah, I disagree with the fact that he committed a great sin. This is my thing.
You do agree?
I disagree. I don't believe he committed a great sin.
Why?
He did not lie. He gave the information how he felt it could be presented. Which means that in fact she is my sister. Maybe Pharaoh never asked. Oh, by the way, is she also your wife? He just didn't volunteer information he thought might put them in danger.
Okay. So you don't think that the whole thing that Abraham should trust in God applies here?
God gives us the ability to make choices. When confronted with situations, we have to trust that God is going to let us make the right choice. So the choice we make is the right choice.
Okay, Miriam.
Well, did he really trust God? To me, that's what he's saying. He should have trusted God, but he did not really trust God at that moment.
Well, Barry's arguing that that Abraham feels that God would want him to do what he thinks is right. That it's like the story of the guy in New Orleans, and the Katrina waters are coming up, and he's praying to God, and he's climbing higher and higher on his roof, and then the Coast Guard comes, and he says, "No, I'm waiting for God." And a helicopter comes, waiting for God. And as the water's about to engulf him, he says, "God, where were you?" And God says, "Well, I sent the boat and I sent the helicopter."
Oh, yes, it's an old joke.
Yeah. But remember, he still is lying, and he knows that lying is not correct. So if he trusted God, then he should have said that she was his wife.
That only works if you think he was lying. And I do not believe he was lying.
All right, so we have to define lying. There's technically lying, saying factually wrong information, and there's misleading, where you're not revealing everything. Like Marcia was saying, she expected her children to not admit important things as well as tell the truth. You have to also not leave things out. Rochelle.
Rabbi?
Yes, Larry. Okay, Larry and then Rochelle.
Yes, I'm confused because I'm just like walked in at this particular thing, and I'm not exactly knowing what's happening or what are people.
So we're talking about lying. Is it ever right to lie? In this story that we were sent you over the week, Abraham lies to the Pharaoh in the very beginning.
No, I think I never got it.
Okay.
One way or another, I don't get it. It's very straight. I'm not sure where I'm at and where it's coming and where it's going to, and so on. So if I could speak to you at some point together without me, then at least I can you can understand what I'm talking about. But otherwise, I'm in the middle of nothing and not knowing.
Okay, I'll call Alan right after this session.
Why are you calling Alan, or you could call me?
Okay, I can call you and I'll send you.
One way or the other. I mean, what he doesn't.
Reva,
Evasive
is Larry on the email thing to receive?
I'll
Yeah.
check it.
So, Larry, you are getting the emails, but I'll do my best to see what I can do.
Please.
Okay, thanks, Larry. Rochelle.
Okay.
And this is kind of in response to Miriam. I believe that Abraham actually probably did trust God. He just didn't trust Pharaoh. And it's hard to say it, or anybody in that land. And it may be hard to say how quickly would God intercede. Would God intercede immediately if anything was to start to go wrong, with his wife? But in regards, I feel that because Pharaoh allowed him to leave the land and so on and so forth with all of his riches, I feel as though God was given time to intercede. He softened Pharaoh to not send him a punishment. Maybe I'm looking at it that way.
Yeah. Reva.
Yeah, I think there are two questions. One is, was a lie told? And the second question is, what is the greater good? And I would say, I think he told a lie, or he was certainly deceptive intentionally. And I think he did the right thing.
So it's okay to be deceptive because it's actually, I guess, in everybody's interest. Okay, back to you, Barry.
Good.
Real, if you take a look what happens down the line and you ask yourself, did he make the right decision? He is rewarded with riches. He does become he does survive. God does provide for him. God makes him as numerous as the stars.
So that
everything that happened past this, pretty much to me in any event, and just to me, indicates that one, he did trust God. The decision he made was a direction from God. That he didn't lie. He presented himself. He presented her in a way that, this is hi, my name is Abraham. Welcome to our hello. This is my sister Sarah, which is not a lie. And if you take a look, in my opinion, whatever happened down the road, all the things God gave him and all the rewards he got afterward, seems to prove that the decisions he made at this point might have been the correct ones.
Okay. Babette?
Well, the expression, is it better to be safe than sorry? He wanted the sure thing. I know he had background that God saved Isaac at the last minute, but he wanted the for sure thing.
Okay. Minya, you've been quiet this morning.
I'm trying to differentiate between all of the different things that have been said about what should be, like when Rochelle spoke about having to tell someone only a half truth to protect them. That's one thing. I don't think lying in politics is the right place, because I don't think lying in politics is for the better good or the good of all. And I'm just trying to, in my mind, accept the fact that, is God really on a one-to-one basis with some of the people that we read about? When you say that God is interceding on things that are happening, is he really micromanaging what goes on the earth or in the world? Or is it because of the time period that we don't know that maybe that's really what went on way back thousands of years ago? So I have a lot of these things playing in my mind that I have to straighten out.
All right, right. So if you see God as more of a spiritual force within us, let's say, then it's not reasonable for Abraham to expect God to intervene because God doesn't intervene. Let's take that theological view. You know, most of us have been assuming a more traditional theology here, that God is actually up there and is watching particular people, and particularly Abraham, because he's so important and is ready to intervene in a moment's notice. But that may or may not be the way that many of us, most of us may actually believe. So, and this is a common thing. I mean, I'll talk in sermons, assuming certain belief systems that may or may not be true, but you just kind of, you know, understand, you know, I expect some of my congregation to understand it symbolically, while the other ones may understand it literally. So a lot of it here may involve in what is our actual theology, and we haven't really addressed that yet. Okay, one or two more comments and then we can go on. All right, no, everybody's happy, don't lie. Raise your right hand if you're happy. Raise your left hand if you're not happy, but you don't want to offend me. Raise both hands if you're lying. Oh my God, Bernie Feinberg is the only truthful one here. All right, so so good. Anyone else want to say anything? Okay, who'd like to read? Other commentators disagree at the very, very bottom of page 39 and top of page 40. Okay, Rochelle.
This is the first time I've read anything for you all, so please bear with me. This is coming from Hirsch. Other commentators disagree. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, a leading scholar who lived in Germany from 1808 to 1888, argued that Abram's actions were honorable. He knew that Egyptians would not deal harshly with an unmarried woman traveling with her brother, but that they would kill the husband of a beautiful woman and rape her. So he acted to protect both Sarai and himself. In fact, he was really telling the truth. She was the daughter of his father and actually his sister.
Okay.
The issue
Stop. Thank you, Rochelle. I'll let you continue reading in a couple minutes, but we want to make, so therefore Hirsch is saying that since he was literally telling the truth and she was actually his sister, that basically excuses it. And then second reason is because of the consequences. If he lied, things would probably work out well. If he didn't lie, everyone would suffer. So we've kind of discussed these arguments already, but let's briefly give a couple responses to Hirsch. Do you find one or both of his arguments persuasive? Is it okay to mislead if you're literally telling the truth? And is it okay to outright lie if you are doing so for the welfare of many, most, or all of the people involved? Bonnie and then Pam. If you want, Bonnie, you were just nodding your head. Okay, Pam.
I was agreeing, yes.
Okay, Pam.
Well, let's take an example of the people in Europe who were swallowed up by the Holocaust. If you're a victim of the Holocaust, you say whatever you have to say to have you and your family survive. I mean, you do what you have to do. And I think it's the same thing with Abram. You know, he was in a situation where his Sarah could have been, you know, raped or killed. And he did what he had to do.
All right. So you accept that the consequences argument. What about lying if you're technically telling the truth, but you're misleading? Is that okay in other situations?
You're run that by me again. If you're misleading.
You're misleading, but you're technically telling the truth. So a cop pulls you over. He says, how fast were you going? So you were going 35 miles an hour for 4 seconds, but you were going 80 miles an hour before that. So you'd say, I was going 35 miles an hour, officer, which is technically true. But what he wants to know is what was your highest speed, and you're lying about that.
See, I would answer the question as it was asked, not as I might have thought he meant. I would answer the question as asked truthfully.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Rochelle agrees with you. Jennifer, Miriam.
Yeah, I think it always depends upon the situation. What you're in, what situation are you in? And you have to take a side. Do I lie? Do I not lie? And you do what you think is best. But I think it really depends on what's going on, whether you lie or you don't lie.
Okay.
Just like in his case, he lied because he felt they were going to kill him. Well, that's enough. To me, that's good enough to lie. He didn't want to be killed.
All right. What about if you're a doctor and you make a minor mistake that didn't really hurt the patient, but if you confess it to the medical board, they could suspend your license for a month, and then that'll really hurt your medical reputation. Can you lie about that?
Well, I think in that case, as long as the patient was fine and nothing happened, it might be a little white lie might be okay.
Okay. Rochelle?
I think in situations like that, and I kind of agree with Miriam. I believe her husband was a doctor. In a situation like that where you're looking at legalities and things, was like I worked in an ambulance and I gave a wrong drug to somebody one time. It did not hurt the patient, but I told my board anyway. I told them. I told the doctor when I got to the hospital, the whole 9 yards. What I got was a retrain. I felt better about myself. So I think it comes down to what can you fall asleep at night? Sometimes. What won't keep you up at night? The words that you speak.
Bernie and then Marcia.
Unfortunately, what won't keep you up at night is different for different people. Some people can lie through their teeth all day long and sleep like a baby. So I don't agree with that approach to it at all.
Okay. Rochelle, counter.
Well, absolutely, and I appreciate that, Rabbi. No, and I agree with you. It's one of those. I guess, and that's what I was saying. It kind of is different for every person. Your words that you choose to do and your actions you choose to do every day, whether you're intending to be godly or not, I think that, yeah, it comes down to what can one person live with themselves with. I couldn't make a mistake and fall asleep at night knowing I had made a mistake. I had to tell on myself, basically.
You did no harm.
Well, it doesn't. I harmed myself because I did something wrong. But
you
you're
didn't
right.
hurt anybody.
No, it didn't hurt. It didn't hurt anybody, but it hurt me. That's just me, though.
Well,
other people have their.
Then it depends on the situation and the particular person.
Right, and the person doing it. So somebody who can lie through their teeth and go to sleep at night, God bless them. I can't do it, but if somebody can, they can. It doesn't make it right, but in their mind, it will never make them wrong.
Well, I guess there's certain professions where you have to lie as part of your job. So if you're a defense attorney, right, you're defending these murderers and most of them are probably guilty. Your job is to not lie in a blatant way, but you're trying to give the impression to the jury that the person's innocent. And you probably well know that they're not innocent, but your job and that, they have a right to good defense. And so your job is to try as hard as you can within the legal limits to try to get the person acquitted. So if you're not willing to suspend truth, and what's important to you is truth, and if your client's guilty, you want to stand up in court and say, my client's guilty, life imprisonment, then you can't be a defense attorney, right? So are certain professions where you're supposed to not necessarily outright lie, but basically create the mistaken impressions.
Like politicians.
Well, that's a little different, but yes. Okay, Marcia.
Am I okay? Yeah, I agree with Bernie. I think everybody's level of what's going to make them feel guilty is one thing, but I think where the thing about this whole thing is he was saving his life. And I went back to I mentioned the Spanish Inquisition before, because all those people who lied about themselves being Jewish to say they weren't, to save their own lives, that's important. I mean, that's an important lie, it's a minor lie about, whether the dress is too tight, it doesn't count too much. And it makes that you don't want to hurt somebody's self-worth or visualization, whatever the story. But it is a matter of your threshold, and I understand Rochelle doing that, because even though she gave the wrong medication and the patient was okay, that medication might have had an implication down the road. She was obligated to tell the truth, and she did, and she couldn't let herself get away with that, so to speak, So, and I mean, if you go to a doctor and you've been taking some medicine you shouldn't, and you tell the doctor the wrong thing, you lie about it, you say, oh, I take this, and the other, and you omit all these other drugs that might be harmful and not, that you take on the side that you got a hold of, you're only hurting yourself. So, there's a matter of, you've got to think of the proportion.
Mm-hmm. Sai.
I don't understand why we've been discussing something that has the possibility of being very positive. Why are we assuming that a lie is a negative thing? There are things that go on that it's important that we lie for. And we're all taking the position that if we lie, we're doing a very bad thing. And I don't agree. I think that lying is necessary sometimes to make life make life better for a lot of us, rather than having it negative.
Well, I think that when and we'll be getting into this at some point when we get into the positive psychology stuff that Riva and I are, we've been very busy, as you might imagine. And I promised her some material for the next course, which is the wisdom of the sages, or sage wisdom. And but eventually we're going to get to character and what does that mean in how we talk to people? When are we supposed to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? As they say in the TV shows about court cases. But Sai's arguing lies can be a good thing, and clearly they can, right? Like the case we started out with, you compliment somebody, they pick out a rather ugly looking dress, but they're very proud of it. So it serves everyone's purposes to make a little fib, right? So everybody's happy, and it brings peace to the world, and it doesn't harm anyone. And I think, who is Marcia that just made the example of lying to your doctor about that little bit of cocaine that you take, and that explains why you have the quote unquote postnasal drip. And if you don't tell him about the cocaine, he thinks you have a some other, disease. And if you just told him about the extra drugs you were taking, it would help him to diagnose and treat you. Then that's just self-defeating. Then you're lying. It's hurting his ability to work. It's hurting your ability to get, fixed. It's so those are two extreme examples. But Sai's arguing, I think, that there's a whole class of quote unquote lies that are actually beneficial to you and to the other people and everybody, that actually society couldn't function if people were too honest, right? So, and you can, people who are unfiltered, I think is the word, that they just tell the truth, whatever they see right away. And I still remember when I was in South Africa, my first job, and they had two buildings, and I was officiating the other building where I didn't really know people. And on Rosh Hashanah, and everybody says hello, and a lady comes up, she shakes my hand, Happy New Year, and she says, "My God, you really have as little hair as I thought you did from the distance." So she's just saying what she thought. But I just stood there, my mouth opened up in shock, and then she just walked away, and I have no idea who she was. And but 25 years later, I still remember it. But all she was doing was being honest, right? But she should have just kept her mouth shut and said that was a nice sermon, or nice to meet you, or happy, something more neutral and truthful, but not the whole truth. Okay, Rochelle and Riva. And then,
I believe that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Rochelle, Riva, and then if Barry wants to.
I believe what you just spoke of was somebody not only being truthful, but being opinionated without cause and judgmental. And I was thinking about that when you said people who just are unfiltered, I find them to be more judgmental than to be truthful. Truthful is to respond or to say something that is fact in a conversation. So it's a kind of a two-way conversation type thing, I guess. And for someone to just come up and say that, to me, that's just judgmental and opinionated.
Uh-huh.
So I find a difference there.
Okay, Riva.
Yeah, I would differentiate also between what's the good for me? What can I get out of it? If I say something, or what's the greater good? And I would want to give an example of differentiating in that. I know at a hospital, a research hospital, where a mistake was made and a patient died. And the director of the hospital very publicly acknowledged the error. It was, they gave somebody medication 10 times what they should have. They moved the decimal place incorrectly. So somebody was given 10 times what they should have been given, they died. And the results were that the director of the hospital went on television and other places in public and said, "We made this mistake and a person died." And they followed up by doing an enormous amount of research to develop a system where those kinds of mistakes would be much, much less likely to happen. So I think that was an example where very often in the medical community, things are sometimes covered up. But I think in this example, the greater good was obviously to tell the truth, acknowledge what had happened, and do something about it. So, and Madoff's a perfect example of, sure, the good for him was his family got rich, but the greater good is he did enormous harm.
Barry?
Well, obviously, the woman who came up to you and discussed your coif was from New York. That's pretty obvious. I believe that you should live a life of rigorous honesty in all your affairs. But I don't also think that you necessarily have to volunteer information that is not solicited. In the case of Abraham, my contention is he did not lie. He just did not offer other information that may or may not have been, that but probably wasn't solicited. This is my sister. Well, you stop right there. Oh, is she also your wife? I disagree. But I also think in the medical community is a little different. I mean, I spent a lot of years doing medical malpractice work. I can talk about that one of these days. But I think that, yeah, there are times the truth is the only way out, regardless of how bad it hurts. And the other thing is, well, the more lies you tell, the more confused you get. What did I tell this guy about this incident? What did I tell him? What did I tell him? Of course, we were all supposed to go to the same event, but I told him one thing. I couldn't go. I told her another thing I couldn't go. I forgot who I told what to. And you just get yourself in a rut. Now, there are people who can sleep through that. I can't personally, but I think honesty is the best policy. I think I honestly believe that. But then again, I don't think Abraham was dishonest.
Okay. Jennifer, Shirley, Steve, Bernie, anyone? Steve? Babette? Okay, Marcia.
Big mouth Marcia here. What was the purpose of this story being submitted? What lesson are we supposed to be learning from it?
Oh, well, just from a technical point of view, the stories of the Torah came to us as they are. We don't know. There's not like a study guide or an editor's guide where the editor of the Torah said, this is why I included this story. I mean, we presume that the editors of the Torah did it because that's the text that they had, right? So they didn't want to leave things out if they had to.
But they left a lot out. I mean, why put this one in?
In terms of written material that they had, well, we don't know that for a fact, but I would say that it, at least my working assumption is that the editors didn't say, oh, let's put this in because it makes a certain point. They had it and it fit chronologically, so they put it in. Now, why was it passed? Why was this a story that was passed along and then was written down? We could research that. I'm sure Sai will ask me, well, how does this reflect other surrounding cultures? And you can see it clearly is interacting with other cultures because it's about Abraham and Sarah coming from one culture in the north, the Mesopotamian culture, going all the way through Israel to the other side of Egypt. So it's like somebody today going from Canada down to Mexico and then over to Hong Kong. So this is a pretty international story. And but what's the point? What's the moral point that it's trying to make? Well, that's not clear. That's, I guess, why we're spending so much time on it. Hopefully we'll clarify other things in the process. Rochelle.
When I read on here, it also brings up, we've been knocking Abram around here. What about Sarah? What was her responsibility? She had every option to say, I'm not just his sister, I'm his wife. And I never thought about it until I read further in here.
But what would be the
Sarah
motive?
also could have said, I am also his wife.
So I guess it all depends on the situation. Afterwards, Pharaoh makes it out like, you didn't have to lie. I would have been quite happy to greet the two of you and as guests, but they didn't, at least according to Hirsch, they didn't know that. They expected that if they told the truth that Abraham would be killed. So it all depends on what the actual situation was. But if we assume that they expected there would be danger, then this is completely justifiable lie or not a lie, if Barry's shaking his head, that it's leaving out some information is completely justified to avoid the high probability of being killed.
It's a survival tactic. That's what it is considered. It is a survival, a life or death. So yeah, everybody's right. But we weren't bringing her really into the fact. And I'm just thinking there was two people involved. So unless women didn't speak back then, I'm uncertain how the culture, well, it wouldn't bother me any. My husband would love it if I didn't speak half the time.
Well,
that's not true.
But Hirsch says he knew that the Egyptians would not deal harshly.
Wait, sorry, what, Barry? I know Justin, and I know that that's not true. Sorry, Barry. Oh, Barry, and then Reva.
It says here he knew that the Egyptians would not deal harshly with an unmarried woman traveling with her brother, but that they would kill the husband of a beautiful woman and rape her.
Right.
I'm pretty sure she didn't want to be raped, so she went along with the story. And it's not a story. She went along with the idea. So, okay, we'll just tell them that I'm your sister, which I am. And we don't have to mention the other thing. If he asks, we'll tell him.
Now, Barry keeps emphasizing that what they said was actually true. What if it wasn't? Would that make any difference if we assume that there was the perception of danger?
You can assume anything you want, but we don't know that. I mean, here's what we're working with. The material we're working with says that she was his sister. I'm not going to speculate on something that we're not,
Okay, Reva.
Yeah, I think the story speaks loudly and the commentary speaks loudly about the role and the status of women in history over time and in other cultures. They were objects rather than human beings. And so I think that's important to notice, how are the women portrayed in this? All we know about her is she's beautiful and she's an object that somebody might covet. And certainly we know in the history of the world that there have been times and places where women were treated as objects.
Okay. Okay, so the role of women in the ancient Near East, Reva, Pam, and Miriam.
Well, I just went.
Okay, Pam?
It being such a patriarchal society, I'm guessing that Sarah might not have even been in the room and heard the whole discussion between the Pharaoh and Abram. I mean, she probably wasn't even part of this discussion. I mean, women were not, they were off to the side, so to speak. So I'm wondering if she even knew what was going on.
Now, Abravanel, who's a 15th century commentator that I've mentioned before, Abraham and Sarah would be at the mercy of the Egyptians who might lust after her and kill him. So what Hirsch says is based on previous commentators. Miriam.
Did he have to, I'm a little curious about this. Did he have to say anything? Abram.
Well, yeah.
I mean, when they were traveling, did he have to say who she was?
Apparently they came
People
in contact.
travel.
Apparently they caccording in contact with the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh says, "Who are you?" According to the Torah, I'll just read you that section. There was a famine in the land of Israel, and Abram descended to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land of Israel. And it occurred as he was about to enter Egypt that he said to his wife Sarai, "See now, I have known that you are a woman of a beautiful appearance. And it shall occur when the Egyptians will see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' Then they will kill me, but you they will let live. Please say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me for your sake, that I may live on account of you." But it occurred with Abram's coming into Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. When the officials of Pharaoh saw her, they lauded her for Pharaoh, and the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. And he treated Abram well for her sake, and he acquired sheep, cattle, donkeys, slaves, and maidservants, female donkeys, and camels. But God afflicted Pharaoh along with his household with severe plagues because of the matter of Sarai, the wife of Abram. Pharaoh summoned Abram and said, "What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she is your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I would take her as my wife? Now here's your wife back. Take her and go." So Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they escorted him and his wife and all that was his out. That's
what's interesting.
That's
what's
the full
interesting.
story.
That's a whole
What's it-
different story.
Yeah.
Right, but what's interesting is after Pharaoh finds out he's his wife, why doesn't he kill Abraham and take her as his own, like Abraham was predicting he would do before the event?
God interceded. God did things to Pharaoh.
There was there's that little play going on there.
Now, it sounds to me from the story that that Pharaoh had sex with Sarah, maybe more than once, and was planning to take. She was already become one of his concubines, and then as a result of this, which is, I guess, adultery, that God made a famine or a plague. I'm sorry. Severe plagues with an X.
Yes, yeah.
So that Bernie.
Let's take a step back for a second. I'm puzzled by the whole concept of they will take somebody's wife, but not his sister.
No, I think if it was the sister, they just would take the sister. If it was a wife, they'd kill the guy first.
Okay, gotcha.
They would take the woman in either case, but it's a question of what happens to the guy. If it's just a brother, he becomes the brother-in-law. If he's a husband, he becomes dead husband. Or yes, Miriam and then Marcia.
Why would Pharaoh single out this beautiful woman when there are so many beautiful women around? Why is he so, why is Abram, why does Abram know about Pharaoh? So is this God's doing? Do you know what I mean? There are other beautiful women.
Yeah, but she was Iraqi, that she looked different than the other Egyptian women. Pharaoh was looking for someone exotic looking, I guess. I mean, I have no idea, Miriam, but I'm just trying to answer your question.
I know, but this is a question that I have.
Right? Marcia.
So now you're telling us about these plagues that happened. And so now you're justifying what Abraham did, I mean, if he wound up doing taking Pharaoh, wound up having his way with Sarah anyway, just not killing Abram. I mean, so it's how did Abram know about Pharaoh? Everybody knew what was going to happen if he said the wrong thing. So why wouldn't he try to protect him and his wife? There's no saying how did Abram know about Pharaoh and what he would do? It was known that this was a practice at that time.
Yeah,
So,
but he was only one person. There are other people around.
it must have happened before with other people passing through. If the pretty girl, let's just take her. This isn't a one of a kind. This is stories that are going on in that area. This was Pharaoh's way. It isn't a one-shotter, but this time it happened to Abram, and that's why it's in the Torah.
Sai.
Well, Rabbi, why do you think this story was being told? What was the point of it?
That's what I said.
I don't know. I puzzled over this, and I don't have a good explanation. I mean, I think if I was Abram in this situation, I would have done the same thing that he did, right? I would, you're not sure. And even afterwards, when Pharaoh says, oh, you could have told me the truth, this is after there were these plagues. So, we can't really rely upon Pharaoh's word after the fact that he wouldn't have harmed Abram, because now there's all these Egyptians dying. So of course, Pharaoh say, you could have told me the truth, but that may or may not have been actually true. So I would have definitely done what he did. But why this story is included, I guess it does lead to discussion. We've been discussing, for over an hour, what does this tell us about lying and not lying in different situations? And I guess, I can compare it to some, dealing with traffic police, when you're supposed to lie, when you're supposed to, is it justified to tell the truth or to not tell the truth? And, I don't know. It's a good question, Sai. I can't answer that. Lorraine or Bonnie or Babette? So what is our conclusions here? That it is justifiable to certainly to leave out information, contrary to Marcia, that if your mother says, what were you doing? So you say, we were drinking tea and watching Netflix, and that as long as that's true, you don't have to talk about injecting heroin and stuff like that. You can leave things out, that's for sure. You can also outright lie if your life is at risk. If you make a mistake, whether you confess to it or not depends kind of on the situation. But if there's somebody whose life may be put in danger, so that if you don't tell them that you gave the person the wrong drug, in 4 hours that person may die, you absolutely have to tell, because otherwise somebody's life could be at risk in the near future. But if you inject them with the wrong medicine that's harmless, then you have to kind of use your judgment. So I think that certainly the way I interpret, Torah in general is, it's a realistic approach that you want to be a good person, but not to the extent of being so, altruistic that you're considered hopelessly naive. So some of it has to be culturally, in cultural context. Different cultures, have different expectations about what is acceptable, minimally acceptable or not. And sometimes you're in a situation where for self-preservation, you may have to not be completely and totally and truthful. And that may be, not necessarily admirable, but understandable under certain situations. Whereas in other situations, deceiving or leaving things out is just not acceptable at all. Any final comments? Nobody wants to lie. Okay, Riva.
Just a small comment. I think particularly the women here are very aware of that there are situations where women are at risk, and certainly in the past and certainly in other cultures. And in this story, Sarah doesn't do anything. She's just an object, essentially. But in the real world, even now, women in certain places, when they travel, they dress like a boy. They dress down. They dress to be as invisible and as unappealing as possible. And I think, that kind of thing doesn't happen in this story because the woman doesn't really have a role.
Now, of course, we could expand on this and talk about the women's role in Judaism, and that would be a very interesting topic for another time. But we obviously aren't going to get into that in the last few minutes here. Any other final comments, Bonnie or Minya? Anyone else? Okay.
Oh, Rabbi, you gained so much weight.
Miriam.
I have a comment
Okay.
before we go. After listening to everybody, listening to the different points of views, the history that's been written about Abraham and Sarah, I think it's probably up to each person for them to decide what is a true lie and what is perhaps not giving all the information, but you're not really lying because nobody asked you a specific question to where you would have to give all the information. And I think that it's just a matter of each person's beliefs, their conscience. What do they consider a lie? What do they consider not coming forth with everything in order to avoid hurting someone's feeling? And again, to me, lying when you say something that is completely untrue in order to harm another person, for other people to dislike that person, that's an out and out lie. And those lies are the ones that really bother me the most. I mean, if I was wearing a dress and I said, oh, do you like this dress? And somebody said, no, not really, it wouldn't bother me. But if somebody said something untrue about me that not only hurt me, but caused other people to hear this untruth, and they had based on that lie, they formed an opinion about me, possibly disliking me, I think that is one of the worst things you can do. And I think a lot of women, perhaps going back even to high school, may have been the object of somebody's ugly rumor about them, or in the workplace. But there are people that just, they're mean.
Yeah. Thank you, Bonnie. That's very true. Okay, Riva, any announcements or anything, or and then over to Steve.
No announcements today, but we're working on an adult education program. The rabbi mentioned we're going to be doing Pirkei Avot, I believe next month, late in the month. We'll, as soon as we have more information and details to give you, we will pass it along. So be prepared for other adult education opportunities.
Great. Over to you, Steve.
Well, this is no lie. It's been an interesting discussion.
I agree.
Let us conclude with the final, blessing after a Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan Torah emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tokenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Blessed is Adonai our God,
ruler of the universe, has given us teaching of truth, planning within us eternal life.
Blessed
Blessed
is
my giver of the Torah.
Amen.
All right, everyone.
Amen.
Have a wonderful rest of the day, and we'll see you soon. Be safe.
Ta-ta, everybody.
You all have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You
Bye
too.
bye, Rabbi.
Class.
Lorraine, thank you.
Oh, you're
Miriam.
welcome, Miriam. I hope you are as pleased as I am with him.
Well, I hope so, because my son wanted me to go to Maine